In this video tutorial, we're going to be talking about weathering your models, but we won't be doing it in the traditional sense. We'll be doing it in Adobe Photoshop. When we're done, the results will look something like this. We're going to take multiple photographs of the same model, and then we're going to use layer masking techniques to change the properties of what the models look like, and the end result will look like we actually have two separate models being photographed together when it's really the same model with some adjustments made. From the photo shoot to post-production, I'm going to show you some of the workflow that I use that I think is important to you. My name is Ken Pearson, and this is Ken Pearson Photography. Alright, in this video tutorial we're going to be photographing the Bandai VF1S Veritech Fighter. This is such a nice piece to photograph. I was very happy I was able to get one. And so this isn't a model, this is actually a finished good, and if you're not familiar with the series, this particular piece has three different configurations. So naturally this is going to be the fighter jet mode, then there's also the Battloid mode, which is a full robot figure, and then there's what they call Guardian mode, and that's half robot, half jet, and so it's a combination of the two. I'll be photographing all of those and doing different series on each one of those. But in this case over here, what I've chosen to do is just a series on the weathering and then some of the photos I did with the jet itself. Now, it's because of the configurations that I chose to do the weathering in Photoshop after the fact, just because I want to photograph each one of these and I want to make sure that the weathering is going to look exactly the way that I want it to in each one of those photos, so I have a little bit more control by doing it that way. The other thing is that if you're not familiar with the series, there's a variety of different characters who have their own color schemes with their planes. So in the series, this is Rick Hunter's color scheme. He's red and black. He's the main character in the show. And then there's other characters that have different color schemes. Some of it is just as simple as changing the red out to yellow, and others have completely different color planes. So in this photograph, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using layer masks to change the properties of the plane, and I'm going to give him a companion in his photo, which is going to be another character by the name of Max Sterling, and his plane is going to be mostly blue and white. So it doesn't just have the blue here. The top of the plane is blue, the wings are blue, and the belly is mostly white. There's a lot you'll see there. So yeah, and then I'm also able to give it its own weathering as well. So I'm going to be using layer masks as well. So basically we're taking this plane, photographing it twice, and making it look like two different planes entirely. So with that said, let's get started. Alright, so let's take a look and get acclimated to the layer set that I've built and prepared off to the side. So what I like to do is I like to work with a black background, so I'm going to turn that on and I'm going to turn off this image. And now I have two planes that are listed over here. The first one is going to be Rick Hunter, and the second one over here is going to be the Max Sterling plane. Okay, so we're going to be doing a couple of different things, as I mentioned, to that, and we're going to work primarily with this one. Okay, all right, so let's get started. I'm going to turn off the Max Sterling layer, leave it at that, and we're going to work with this. Now, the first thing that I like to do with every single master layer that I work with is to make a duplicate. So I always want to have one master, and I'm going to make a duplicate, and I'm going to call it working copy. So I'm going to right click duplicate, and then I'm going to call this V1 working copy. All right, now I can do whatever I want with this and I'm happy. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the master and work with this. Now the first one we're going to be doing is we're going to go ahead and we're going to work on the weathering. So I'm going to talk about how to do that, and there's no one particular way to do this, but I am going to talk about some of the techniques and some of the things you can be doing as it relates to the controls that you have available to you. Okay, so we're going to talk about this. Let's go ahead and first of all select everything, and then I want to inverse the selection. Okay, so I want to select the plane here. Now I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call this one weathering. Now here's a bit of a tip. You can use one layer, you can use 100 layers, doesn't make a difference. So if you want to have different shades and different tones, so say you're working with a vehicle where there's going to be some rust on it, there's going to be some grease grime, there's also going to be some soot, some dirt. You can do those with different layers, and I recommend doing that. So you can have as many as you want. So just reapply this same technique that I'm using with one layer to as many layers as you want to use. In this case, I'm just going to use the one color, okay? So now I'm going to choose black as my brush. Okay, and I'm going to choose my brush over here, and then I'm going to go into my different brushes that I have available to me, and I'm going to choose one of these guys as an example. Okay, and you can see I still want to keep this selected because I want to make sure whatever I'm going to be painting on here is only going to be within the selection. I don't want this to spill over, okay, so that's why I'm doing it this way. So I'm going to do this. That's not good. I'm going to choose this one. Maybe we'll do something bigger. See if we can do something like this. All right, I want to make sure my opacity is going to be full. Okay, I want full opacity. Okay, so I'm going to do something like this, and I'm going to start to cover the whole plane. Okay, be careful not to do too much. Okay, just cover the whole plane. All right. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I want to make this a smart object. Okay, so let me just get back into my move tool over here. I want to make this a smart object, and the reason why I want to make this a smart object is because I'm going to make some adjustments to it. I don't know which adjustments are going to stick or which ones are going to go. So having it as a smart object means that I can make some adjustments to it and then reapply new adjustments and so on if I'm not happy. Okay, so for instance, in this instance, what I want to do is I want to apply a blur to it. If I don't make it a smart object, the blur that I'm about to apply is going to be the blur that I'm stuck with. Okay, so let's go over here. Let's make it a smart object. Okay, so I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose convert to smart object. Okay, give it a second, and now you can see here that it's a smart object. So now when I go to my blur, I'll choose this here, my Gaussian blur, and it's going to give me something along these lines. Okay, so I can make it more blurry, less blurry, and if you want, you can use some layers that would be less blurry than others if you want to, sort of jazz up your weathering using different colors and different brushes and so on. I'm going to stick with this just for the sake of the exercise. Okay, I'm going to click on this, click OK, and then let's zoom in a little bit more. Okay, all right, so now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and make this I'm going to go ahead and make this a layer mask. Okay, so I did this, I made it a layer mask, and then I'm going to go ahead and start to paint back on here where I want that weathering to be. So it's just like you're painting a real model now. Now, one of the most important things I just want to step back and tell you is that it's important to blur your selection while you have the selection tool on. Okay, so I went ahead and I blurred that just simply because if I didn't have the selection tool on, the blur would go outside of this and would look god awful. Okay, so you don't want to have to deal with that. Yeah, you can use one of your layers here to get rid of it, but at the same time, this just prevents that from happening, and you can do what you need to do without having to go back and fix anything. All right, so here's a couple of things we want to talk about as it relates to painting on the weathering. Okay, so this is much like you're weathering a real model. In this case, we're going to use a brush. Okay, and in this case, what I want to do is I want to go back up here and use one of my brushes, and I can change sizes. So let's take a look at the tools that we have available to us. Okay, first of all, when I'm painting my brush on, I have my opacity tool. Okay, and this will allow me to determine how strong I want this to be. So for instance, I'm at 100%. If I do this, sorry, I have to, this black is for erasing and white is for painting. Okay, so that's also another advantage that you have when you're doing this in Photoshop, is that if you make any mistakes, you can undo them. So in this case over here, I'm going to start painting on, and you can see that looks awful, right? So I'm going to start painting this on, and that's not what I'm looking for. Okay, I'm not happy with this at all, so I would never do this. So in this case, I can undo it, obviously, Command Z, and then I can make my brush smaller. So the two takeaways were is that my brush was too heavy and it was too big. So now I'm going to change my hardness of my brush, my opacity, all the way down here to something like, we're just going to even start at 10. Okay, this means that I can draw something like this, and as I draw over it over and over again, then I'm making it harder and more visible, okay? So it's almost like, picture like you're scratching off a lottery ticket. You start soft and then you keep going over the same spot, and finally the scratch off reveals your winning number, okay? So you can see that there. Now if you want to undo this, obviously you can, there's plenty of ways you can undo what you're doing, but if you want to erase it, you can go over here, just change up the opacity, because the erasing works the same, okay? So if I'm erasing just with a 10% opacity, I'm gently erasing, so that's another advantage. I can start to scrape away or put back some of this, okay, and give it that lighter look. So very nice. So I want to get rid of everything. I'm just going to do this here like this, and then I'm just going to get rid of everything, okay? Now, what I recommend in this case is that what you do is you go back over here, you turn on the white layer. Let's get right in here, okay? And we're going to go back to our brush tool, and we're going to go back to something that's going to be a lot lighter, 15%, okay? And I'm gently going to start outlining. That maybe brush a little bit too big. I'm going to gently start outlining around where this would have some weathering, okay? So it's not exactly panel lining, right? We're not really doing that, although you can see you get some of that effect, okay? But we're getting that weathering spill over there, okay? So it's very, very nice. Now what's cool about this is that I can start with something dark in the center, bring my opacity down even more, maybe too much, okay? Maybe 8%. And then I can make my brush larger and then go over it again, okay? So it gives it that a little bit more of a bleed, okay? So really, really nice, okay? So I can just follow that and give it a bit of a bleed, okay? So I can do the same thing over here. There's no process to follow really. You start with what you want. You can start with the bigger one at the beginning and then go down to the smaller one, okay? 12%. Let's bring it down to smaller, and then just do something like this and start to add those lines, okay? Make them a little bit more visible, recognizable, okay? So you get that there, all right? So you can do that. Now what's also nice about this over here, see what's really great is that if I don't like something, I can just undo it and it gives me that advantage, okay? So what's also nice is that if you're photographing the same model, another advantage that you have is you're photographing the same model and using it in the final image more than once. This gives you an opportunity to provide a unique weathering experience to the same model. So in this case, there is no weathering whatsoever, and I can just do whatever I want, okay? And I can just make it look like one has more scratches than the other, or put different, I mean, everything's about it is gonna look unique, okay? Another thing I can do for larger areas like this is too white, okay? I know that the plane is white, it looks nice, it's very clean in the show, but at the same time here I want to give this more of a realistic look. So what I'll do here is that I'm gonna go here and just put my opacity like really down to 5 and start to, you know, really give, and I can work with the contour of the plane too, right? So that's really nice. So I can sort of bring this out a little bit more, just keep working on this, and now you can see, look at that. It kind of looks nice, right? It gives it more of a dirty effect, you know, that sort of thing. Okay, so if I don't like that too much, some areas, again, I can just do away with it. Now what's also nice is that based on what you're doing here, you can also apply some different brushes. Okay, so I'm going to do this here where I'm going to choose maybe this brush as an example, turn it up, dial it up to maybe around, you know, this, and then start to, oops, my white, start to draw on this a little bit more. See if I can get more in here. So around the this little area, there should be something coming off of that. Okay. What I would also recommend, you see here, I'm going to get in here. So I don't know how well you can see this, but this is more of a texture that demands a direction for the brush. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this entirely. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll paint this back on, but when I choose the brush, okay, I'm going to choose this, bring it down to size, and then I can change the direction of it. Okay, and just work with it. See, if I did that like that, it has more of a diagonal one. Okay, that may be too much, but at the same time you get the idea. Okay, and so if I don't like that, you know, then I can do the exact same thing and then just sort of erase some of this. Okay, so you get a nice little batch. So this is obviously something that's going to take some time, and you go through and you repeat this process entirely. And of course, you can see here that when you're finished, you get something that looks a little bit more intriguing. Okay, so there's a lot here that you can be doing to work on that. Okay, to dirty it up. There's a variety of different brushes. I like some smoke brushes, some dirt brushes, things like that, and then you can just get away with those. Make sure to blur those and whatnot. Okay, so it's very, very nice. All right, let's turn this off here. So the next thing we want to do is we want to add some cannon fire down here. So what I would suggest is that you Google some images for muzzle flares. This is a muzzle flare image that I grabbed off of the internet. Now, all you have to do is Google muzzle flare and you'll see these muzzle flares in black background. So I would just make sure that if you're doing this for fun, that's great, awesome, you can grab what you need, it's out there. Just make sure that if you're designing something and you plan on reselling it, then you want to make sure that you're abiding by licensing agreements that you have with anybody who put the muzzle flare out there. Okay, so there's a lot of textures and things and brushes out there that the same things apply. You just want to make sure you're adhering to the licensing standards of the person who's created the resources for you. So in this case over here, what I want to do is I'm going to change this to screen. And now when I change it to screen, everything that's black is going to disappear. So that allows me to work with it. I'm going to change this around accordingly, move this over here, obviously way too big. So I'm going to shift, hold down, resize to get something that looks a little bit more realistic. Okay, that's proportionate to me. I'm happy. I'm going to click OK and position that. All right, so I'm happy with that. All right, so the next thing that I want to do here, very important, is I want to establish that glow that takes place around here. Okay, so as an example, here you can see the glow in the belly. Okay, so it's from the muzzle flare. We want to get that all around there to make it look realistic. Okay, and you can do this not just with glows from the muzzle flare, but keep in mind that if you have different ambient lighting that's taking place within your scene, you can achieve the same results by doing what I'm about to show you. Okay. All right, so I'm going to hide this here. We're back over here. So we're going to go back over here. I'm going to take my original one, this copy that I made. And now what I'm going to do is, in this case, again, there's different ways you can do this. I'm showing you the way that I'd like to do it. The way that works for me is I'm going to duplicate this. And I'm going to call it Fire Glow. Okay? And I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to do this, and you can see here now I have this one on top. Okay, so it's below the dirt and the grime, but it's on top. You don't necessarily have to leave it there, but I'm just going to do this like this. I'm just going to leave it here. And then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to Image, Adjustment, and I'm going to go to Photo Filter, which is what I like to use. Okay, so I get this over here, and now you can choose which colors you actually want to use. So you can get very specific on how you want to do this. You can use different blends and whatnot. But what's most important when I do this is that I want to jack up the density. Okay, I want to make it as orange as I possibly can. Okay, well, maybe not that orange, but you get the idea. You want to make it, you just want to make it stand out, okay? And the reason for it is because, again, if you haven't guessed already, we're going to paint this on. So again, we have our opacity controls that we can use to mute some of this, and that's exactly what we're going to do, okay? So let me leave it like, we'll just do this, okay? Let me leave it like this for now, and we'll click OK. And then now I don't have to go ahead and make this a smart object. I don't need to do any of that. In this case here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get a layer mask going. Okay, so I took this away, and now I've got my white, I've got my brush, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to choose my tool. Okay, I can use something larger, and what I'll do is I'll go back over here and I'll start to paint. Okay, let me get my opacity at maybe something smaller just so I can start doing this. Okay, so now I'm going to paint like this. Okay, and this is really important because it's not just a matter of doing this where you think that there's going to be a muzzle flare. But what you want to do is that you want to stick with where the light would actually be going. So for instance, you know, I might have some lighting on the inside here, some across the belly over here, okay? And I'm gonna start hard across everything. So for instance, here's a good example, is that right in here, okay, what this would ultimately look like to me, as I believe, it would look like this, okay? I'd have less light on the side, but at the same time, I want to have more on the bottom, right? So I'm having some on the bottom of the gun, over here like this, but maybe not so much on the sides, okay? So follow the light. Just, you know, if this were a computer animation rendering, or this was done, you know, with some sort of 3D studio, I mean, this would certainly solve all the problems for you. But in this case, you're the problem solver, okay? So, you know, you're gonna have to use some of your imagination here. Like for instance, this. Let's just do this, okay? Like that. See, I know it's you're like, what's he doing? It's all the same. No, it is all the same. You're absolutely right. But it's not gonna be, because I'm starting off where I'm putting all of this, and then I'm going to dial it back, okay? So I'll do this like this, okay? And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna choose to remove, okay? And I'm gonna dim this eraser down, and I'm gonna start to just eat away at this, okay? Around areas that I think that it wouldn't be such a big deal, okay? So the further I am from this, like over here, the further I am from it, the more I want to get after erasing it. So in some places, there's just really a subtle glow, okay? Just a hint of light. Just a hint. Where down here, there's more, right? So you get the idea. You're gonna want to play with this a little bit and get it right. Okay? Bring this down a little bit. So keep in mind that, you know, if you're seeing a sort of a level of opacity over here, then you want to make sure that this matches, because this gunfire is in the middle, okay? So concentrate on all the heavy lighting where the lighting is closest to the subject, okay? So you can do that. And again, if you make any mistakes along the way, just go back and fix them. That's the great thing about this. You can't screw this up. You can work on this as little and as much as you want to. So over here is an example, like this guy's kind of on the side, you know, so I'm gonna get rid of some of the signs there, but I'm gonna keep it in the middle there, that sort of thing, okay, as we get into some shadows over there. So like I said, work on as little or as much as you want, okay? All right, so we have that. So again, I didn't do the whole plane, but already look at this. I mean, it looks so much nicer than it did. And this is with minimal effort. I mean, I could spend a lot more time on this and really do some great things, but you know, we got other things to do, don't we? So we're just gonna not do that. All right, so using this same technique, let's take a look at how we can get on Max's plane and change his color to something else, okay? So in this instance over here, I'm gonna take Max's plane, I'm gonna move him up over here, okay? And now, as I mentioned before, what I'm gonna do is I wanna do a working copy, okay? So I think this was called, I'm gonna call this for consistency's sake, VF2 working copy, okay? And now, what I'm also gonna do is hide this, and then I'm gonna do duplicate layer, and we're gonna call it VF2 blue, okay? I know you guys are like, oh, I know what he's gonna do. He just did it twice, so this is what's gonna happen. This is how he's gonna change it blue. So in this case over here, I'm gonna go to adjustments, and I'm gonna go to hue saturation, okay? And then I'm going to choose to change the color to blue. Okay, I'm going to colorize this accordingly and do something like this. We'll see how that looks. You can choose whatever blue you want to choose. Okay, so you can do that. Now, here's something else that's really nice. Let's take it a step further. Let's cancel this. I'm gonna go ahead. You're like, what's he doing? Yeah, he's going for it. I'm gonna go convert to smart object, and now I'm gonna go to hue saturation. Do the exact same thing. Okay, and I can choose this blue like this. Let's just go with this. Okay, I'm happy. And I go, yeah, I did it. That's amazing. And then what I can do is like, oh, you know what? I don't like that. So let's go back over here and let's just lighten it up. So at any given time, I can just go ahead and change this to whatever color I want. So I'm going to go over here. We'll just leave it at that. Now I'm going to do this here like this. We're going to do that. Whatever. Again, I don't even have to do this now. I can start with this process just to get my process going. And then I'm going to go ahead and just choose this. We'll say this is going to be the blue, okay? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that into a layer mask, okay? And as you can imagine, what am I going to do? I'm going to paint on the blue, okay? Now in this case, I want it to be full opacity. Now I'm doing a sloppy job here, okay? There's no doubt that I'm doing a sloppy job. I'm not, I'm gonna go around all of this. I'm gonna, really do what I need to do to get rid of this, but I'm gonna choose where I want the plane to be blue, and then I'm gonna go ahead and clean all that up later on, okay? So in this instance over here, what I would have done is I would have, I would have got this all weathered first, and then I do all this, and then I'm going to come back and really be meticulous about what needs to be what color. Now, you may be doing a model that you're being creative, you're doing whatever you want, you're changing the tone of the brown or some greens, maybe you're doing something like a military vehicle of some sort. This is a particular, color scheme that this character's plane has. Now I will say that he has like a bunch of different planes that are blue, so you can go ahead and do this, but as you do something like this, then you can go ahead and you can start to get in here and then just get rid of these guys and start doing that. You see what I'm saying? So you can do all that there like this. Just undo this. You get the idea. Now the other thing that you just would want to do with this, and I'm gonna stop at this part here just to show you that once we're finished with this, Max's plane is going to be off in the distance, okay? And so what I would suggest is that when we're working with Max's plane, maybe at some point, I like to keep copies of what I have. So what I might do is I might just go ahead and say duplicate group, okay? Hide this one. I love to keep copies. I'm just crazy like that, okay? So maybe that doesn't work for you, but it seems to work well for me. So in this case over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to group these. Okay, so I'm going to say merge these two layers. Now it's going to flatten this, and now I can't make any more changes to this. Okay, it's been flattened into one. And so why I did that is because I need to bring them together. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make another smart object. And from there, what I'm going to do is, because he's in the background, I need to blur him, okay? So I don't necessarily know that that's the right amount of blurring, okay? Maybe not too much, but here's what's nice. Once I get that and I move that over here, and then I bring in, where am I? With Rick's plane over here. Oops, I'm going to do that. All right, so I'll take Rick's plane over here and move his stuff down here. Now I get a sense of Rick's in the foreground, Max is in the background, and at this point, because I made this a smart filter, if it's blurred not enough, I can blur it more. That's too much. If it's too much, I can bring it down, I can dial it down a little bit, okay? So I try that whenever I have something that's going to be two vehicles in the photo, one needs to be the centerpiece, the other one needs to be the sort of background piece in this case. One thing that's also not correct is that in the case of Max's plane, if he's going to be that blurry, he probably needs to be smaller. Okay, so that's where you get that smaller look. So now it definitely looks like he's going to be further in the back. We've got the blur. We're happy to go. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the things you can be doing with the models that you have if you want to put them into action scenes like this. I thought that would be at least a great start for you to get going. And again, as always, I thank you for tuning in. If you liked what you saw today, for some simple techniques and tricks like this, just go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any comments or other techniques that you like to see or use in your Photoshop applications and some demonstrations or reference material you want to point to, go ahead and leave that in the comments down below. Always like to hear people share what they like and what they do. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.